So, what ended up happening is I lost all control, like all of it. I had absolutely no power whatsoever, and I didn't know what to do to get it back. Peace and blessings, everyone. This is Elegant Granny, your restoration strategist and creator and host of the Proactive Eye podcast. If you are looking for the link to the podcast, check out the description box. It will be right there. I am talking to you today about economic power and how it affects victims and survivors of abuse. That's who I predominantly work with. And I also help supporters of the victims and survivors. Sometimes they don't know what to do, sometimes they don't know what to say, and I help them with some resources in order to help their loved ones or people they know who are in need of that help. So, today I want to talk about 5 different things that leads to the abuser or the perpetrator on how they end up with power, economic power over their victim. And um, what I want to say is, I do have a personal story to share with this. I'm only going to share that in part two. This is part one of this, and I'm going to talk about the 5 different things that leads up to having power over their victims. The first thing is image. It is so important to the perpetrator or the abuser for the image of them to look so good in front of the public, in front of everybody. So they spend a lot of time focusing and moving things and situating everything in their favor so that they look good in the eyes of the public, and the person they are using as their enabler, the one that they are choosing to have economic power over, those are the ones that people are starting to not want to see them or visit them or have anything to do with them anymore. They change your narrative. They change that person's narrative, is what they're doing. And this is why you hear a lot of people talking about when, as they are struggling to go forth in life and start thriving again, how they had to change the narrative. And this is pretty much what is happening in this situation with the abuser, is changing the narrative of the victim. A lot of people think that the victims are weak. That's a myth. In another video, we'll talk about that. That's one of the myths. They choose strong people. They don't go after weak people because weak people cannot enable them to be the way they are. They choose strong people on purpose because they help them to be who they want to be and who they want to continue being. They have all the means, they're their supplier. They, whether it's through emotional power, through financial power, whatever it is, they're with that person because there are some benefits to them, not because they're weak and they're powerless. There's a lot of power in that person that they are trying to overtake. That's the reason why they chose them in the first place. So, as I was saying, they work on the image first. They have to look like the nice person. It doesn't matter if they're male or female. They have to look like the nice man or the nice woman. And they choose to have people's focus on them a lot, not the victim, but on them. And there's a reason for that. Um, After the image, then they start with control. It is so important for them because that's how narcissists work. They love, one of the main things about them is they have to have control over everything. And a lot of times with their victims, they have no control over anything. So they study the victim. They study their target of who they want to use as their enabler and their supplier. They study them. They study their strengths and they study their weaknesses. They don't just study their weaknesses, but they also study their strengths. They need their strengths because their strengths is how they build themselves up. They don't build themselves up on that person's weakness. They do it on their strengths, but they tear that person down with their weakness. That's how that works. After they gain control, because that's an important factor for them, this is how they survive. Once they get control, then they move into the third thing, which is power. They start exerting power. They cannot exert power over what they don't have control over or what they don't think they have control over. And what happens here is a lot of more manipulation going on. These things build up and they don't just happen overnight. And a lot of times when you're a busy person, you don't realize things are happening to you. That's another thing that I want to interject here. Some people think because you were in an abusive relationship that you saw signs. A lot of times you don't see signs. And I'm going to tell you why, especially when you're dealing with a narcissist, and not just narcissist in particular, but a predatory narcissist. There is a difference. And in another video, I'm going to explain the difference between a predatory narcissist and a non-predatory narcissist, because there is a difference. It is a big difference. They don't operate the same. So image, they work on changing the narrative. They work on gaining control so they can exert power. Because like I said, without control, they cannot move into exerting their power if they do not have anything that they can control. And how some of the things that they do is they can separate you or isolate you from your family. They can dictate who's your friend, who's not your friend. I'm just saying the stuff in general that happens to people. A lot of these are not particularly what I went through. I will go into what I actually went through in another video. But controlling what's going to be bought, what's not going to be bought, when you're going to buy it. Then once they get power over that, then the abuse starts. That's when the devaluation comes in. All of a sudden, you're no good. All of a sudden, you're fat. All of a sudden, you're ugly. All of a sudden, you can't do anything. You can't do anything right. And it's your fault that they go out and cheat. It's your fault that they're not better than they are. It's your fault that you're living in a section of town when they could have been in another section of town. Everything becomes your fault. Nothing about you is right. Absolutely nothing. They devalue absolutely everything about you. After that, then comes the financial abuse. Once they get to value you enough, at some point, no matter how strong you are, it wears you down, especially when nothing is being poured back into you. You're pouring a lot into this person doing the first three things: the image and the control and the power, because what the victim wants is they want peace. That's all they're looking for, is they want peace. And so they'll do whatever it takes to get that peace, even if it's to relinquish some of their control over parts of them. All they're looking for is peace. And I'm going to go into that in another video because a lot of people have an issue with that. But I'm going to explain to you from my own personal experience how a person can get to that point. So, as I was saying, image, control. Once they get control, then they can go into power. But they cannot get power over what they cannot control. They cannot control what they have not studied, so they can change the narrative. Once they change the narrative of something, they can control it. Once they can change the narrative to go things into their favor, they can gain control. Once they can gain control, then they can exert their power. Once they exert their power, then the devaluation comes in and they feel more comfortable in there. But they have to feel comfortable in being able to do those things. So that's why it's so important for them to go through these steps. Once they do the evaluation, then the financial abuse comes in, then the emotional abuse comes in, everything. All of that comes into economic power. Now, these are the 5 different things. And it could be more, but these are the 5 common things that happens to victims and survivors of abuse, because a lot of people get away from toxic relationships that they were in and they end up meeting other toxic people thinking they are in a safe place, but they end up with other people who are just as toxic as the person they just left. That's a whole nother video. So much to this that you don't think about that people deal with, but it's a lot. And Granny gonna help you with that this year. It's gonna take some time, but Granny gonna break it down for you, okay? So I hope some of this has helped you to understand some of the things that victims and survivors go through as they try to gain some sense of peace and try to formulate a plan to get away. Or there are some who just can't think that far. But you, as a supporter, can get some knowledge about some of these things, and you can help develop. Sorry about that. The video went out, but you can help them develop and formulate a plan of escape. And that's the important thing, because sometimes they can't, but somebody else that they can trust. Sometimes they need someone to just come in and take control, but there's a way you have to do it, and it has to be safe. It has to be just as safe for you as the supporter as it is for them as they try to get out. So I hope this has helped, and be looking for part 2. I hope that you remember that healing is a continuous process, not a one-shot deal. Much love, peace, light, and healing vibes.